decades ago was a consultant specifically for a nonprofit. And I realized very quickly that that particular industry did not align with my philosophies. And so it's very near and dear to my heart that nonprofit leaders and nonprofit organizations have the guidance and have real actionable information that they can use. And so I put together this panel. They are all amazing. They're all experts, not just in leadership as a whole, but also specifically for nonprofits. And each one has a particular niche, if you will. Again, although they will be able to speak across topics, but Nikki is amazing when it comes to purpose. And Spring is amazing when it comes to profitability and revenue. And Trisetta is amazing when it comes to productivity. And so I want you to have that in mind when we start engaging with them and listening to their tips and their stories and their guidance. Now, I'm going to jump off with a tip of my own, and then I'm going to pass it to the next speaker. They're going to introduce themselves, and they are going to give you a hot, juicy tip that you can use right away, specifically from their area of expertise for this call. My tip is this. Please, please, please understand that just because it is a nonprofit doesn't mean that you cannot make a boatload of money. Billions and billions can be made by a nonprofit. And in fact, you are going to need lots of money to complete the mission that your nonprofit was designed for. And so this concept of nonprofits being broke and nonprofits struggling is absolutely nonsense. And therein lies why I left that particular niche, because they were tired of me complaining about it. So I'm going to pass the mic to Nikki. And Nikki, please introduce yourself. And then I would love you to just share one amazing, juicy, yummy nugget that has to do with purpose.
Well, good morning, Dr. Lynette, and thank you for this invitation. I am also excited to be here. I am Nikki Sanders. I have been working in the nonprofit industry for over 2 decades and doing work that absolutely positively impacts the world in a very special way. Something that is very special to me, in addition to being in senior leadership in terms of nonprofit organizations, I'm also passionate about youth and young people. And so with that, I am an internship supervisor to multiple degrees of students, as well as an educator. So teaching undergraduate courses, creating more leaders. And the tip that I want to give actually piggybacks off of what you just said, which is my personal mantra and what I share with my clients, my students, my interns, which is that you deserve to do work that feeds your heart, your mind, and your wallet. We have to remember that, like Dr. Lynette said, we don't have to be poor. My background is specifically in social work. I have a master's degree in social work. And so this applies to us all. But what I say to social workers specifically is social workers don't take a vow of poverty. So remember that. None of us have taken a vow of poverty. We get to do work that feeds our heart, our minds, and our wallets. And we get to help people and feel good about it without struggling to live. So that's my voice and my tip.
I absolutely love that, because you're right. Social workers tend to work in nonprofits. It seems, I don't know why that seems to be statistically true, and we may talk about that later, but it was an amazing addition or extension to the concept of money. And being a person in a profession that is giving does not mean that you too have to be without, or have to go without, have to be completely selfless. Okay, Tracetta, let's see if Tracetta is ready. She was traveling the roads, and we're going to check her mic and see if she's come to a place that is very hearable.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, yay. You found that place, didn't you?
I just had to get out the country. That was all. Like Nikki said, I want to say thank you to you, Dr. Lynette, for the invitation to participate in this LinkedIn Live event. Productivity. I'm very passionate about productivity. I started my productivity journey my freshman year of college, after getting pregnant and giving birth to my daughter I guess technically I was a junior or sophomore by the time I gave birth. But it was just necessary for me to be able to manage my time, be productive, because I was working full-time, going to school full-time, and a brand new mom, and a single mom at that. So that really kind of started me on this journey. And over the years, as people started seeing, like, how in the world are you able to get so much done? I started really integrating it into my career, and then ultimately stepped away from working for someone else to working for myself and really helping others to be more productive. A couple of years ago, I made the transition to really focusing specifically on nonprofits because, half of my career I spent in the nonprofit sector across multiple industries. So, oftentimes when we think about nonprofits, we think about just your United Ways, Red Cross, those type organizations. But there's, government agencies are also nonprofits. Academic institutions are also nonprofits. And so I spent about half of my career working across multiple different types of nonprofit organizations. And like you, Dr. Lynette, and Nikki were saying, oftentimes we feel like my degree's in social work as well. Oftentimes we feel like when you're a social worker or when you're doing work for the impact of others, that you have to do it in a way that there's no money in it, right? That you can't make any money in it, and that you have to self-sacrifice. And oftentimes, not only are we self-sacrificing from a financial standpoint, but we're self-sacrificing in our time to the point where we're burnout. Burnout is very rampant across the helping professions. And so that's why I really decided to focus on nonprofit leaders, to help them to make more time to prioritize themselves so that they can really have the impact that they really desire to have for the communities and people that they serve. My quick tip would be to use the 2-minute rule. We have these never-ending to-do lists, right? And it can be overwhelming when you're looking at it and saying, like, oh my gosh, I have all these things that I need to get done. And you might even be trying to focus on something else when you think, oh, I need to do this. Well, here's my rule of thumb. If it will take you less than 2 minutes to do, when you think of it, do it right away. That way you get it out of, it's done and over with. If not, write it down on a piece of paper until you're finished with whatever the focus task is that you're working on. So that's my quick tip. Use the 2-minute rule.
Awesome. I love to have quick tips and rules like that, because some rules will work for this person and some rules will work better for this person. When you have a lot of tools that you can pull from, then you are usually able to be much more successful and productive, rather than believing that only one tool fits everyone or every situation. It's almost like that saying, does every what is it? I bet I know one of you know the thing about bringing a hammer to every nail.
Yes. It's like if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail.
Right, there you go. That's what that reminds me of, right? And so I love that you added a tool to our toolbox. Okay, Spring, you ready?
Good morning, guys. I am ready.
Go for it. The mic is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. for putting this together and for having me here. I feel like a newbie in the group. I mean, my experience is across 10 years in various nonprofits as well. I spent a lot of time in education and nonprofit organizations that support educational institutions. And so I have seen a lot in terms of what works and what doesn't work. And one of the best pieces of advice that I can give to nonprofit organizations is that you want to make sure you, at the bare minimum, are filing your taxes every year. So just because you are a tax-exempt organization does not mean that you do not have to file your taxes, because you do. And so you have to file to show what you received for the year. So any donations that you've received, any memberships that you may have for your organization, or any sort of work that you've done that you've received compensation for within the organization, that has to be filed on your taxes. And like Dr. Lynette says, this has always been my mantra as well, nonprofit does not mean not profitable. It just means that you have different rules that apply to you. Because you are a tax-exempt organization, there are some regulatory things that apply to you that don't necessarily apply to for-profit organizations, because for-profit organizations are paying taxes. So, they can make as much money as they want. And as a nonprofit organization, you can make as much money as you want as well, but you have to show where the money is coming from, how you're getting it, and you have to make sure that you are filing your taxes. So you want to make sure you work with someone who understands how to file taxes for nonprofit organizations. And you, at the very least, want to have an accounting professional on your team that can help you stay in compliance. And so for me, I guess I need to sort of back up a little bit. Where I started was in education, and I started in HR and then moved into education. And so I just saw a lot of things happening on the back end where I'm like, man, like if you only did this or if you only did that, you wouldn't even be in all this trouble in the first place. So here we are about 10 years later, and I stepped out on my own just a couple of years ago to really start supporting these organizations and just keeping it all together. So I help organizations with fund development, with grant writing, with compliance things, all the things nonprofit, but with a specific focus in making sure that your finances are in order, because major donors are going to want to see your financial statements. If you're going for a government grant or even a private foundation grant, they at the bare minimum want to see at least 2 years of taxes filed for your organization. So that's where I come in. And so my husband, it's sort of like a bonus. Like when you hire me, you hire him too, because he's a certified tax professional. He's getting his MBA in finance right now. So yeah, that's me. That's what I do. And that's where I come from and where I'm going.
Well, first of all, who doesn't like a 2-for bonus? Thank you for sharing that. We appreciate it. We love power couples, so that is absolutely amazing. And I love that you shared the taxes, because I cannot begin to tell you how many nonprofits are not filing their taxes, and it's they're not doing it intentionally. They don't know. And a lot of it, and again, you guys will hear so much passion from me about this, because this is where I started my consultant journey. And a lot of nonprofits are mom and pops. A lot of nonprofits start because something horrendous happened in their life, and they want to, there's a movement, there's a cause, their son died in a car accident with a drunk driver, whatever. It's very personal. So they start these nonprofits. They are on this journey that they're so passionate about, but they don't know anything about building a business. They are not understanding that a nonprofit is still a business. So when you talked about the taxes, I was just over here doing a happy dance, because we really do have to continue to follow what those laws are, even if we don't make a dime in our nonprofit. That's the thing I hear a lot, Spring, is, well, but we didn't make any money yet. Well, we didn't get any donors yet. But you do still have to show that that is the case. So I love that that was your golden nugget right out of the gate. So I'm going to go back to Nikki, because I just talked about this whole thing of purpose and why the majority of the nonprofits I've encountered, why they exist. And so, Nikki, you have already shared that you've been in the nonprofit space for decades. And what I would like to know is, when it comes to purpose and mission and vision, what is the number one challenge nonprofit leaders experience?
That is an amazing question. And I would say it is so easy to want to do so much for so many people, and you start to experience mission drift. So when we lead with purpose, when we lead with passion, we get excited, we want to keep going. My mantra really is go deeper and not wider, because you really can't be all things to all people, and you're not supposed to. So specializing, becoming great at something, sticking to the thing that was the thing that made you go into that particular arena is extremely important, especially as we look at funding, because if you are specializing in something, it's a little bit easier to get donors and funding, but also it's easier to bring the right people on board and keep the right people on board. So mission drift is what I see as the biggest challenge, because we want to do so much, because our hearts are so big. But that is the perfect opportunity to partner and collaborate with other organizations, to connect with other resources, instead of trying to be all things to all people. Really specialize and be an expert at the thing that is your thing. So that's always my advice. Go deeper and not wider.
Ooh, I love mission drift. That phrase is amazing, because it's so true, and you get a visual in your head. If you work in nonprofit, if you work with nonprofits, you really do get a vision in your head when you hear mission drift. And I'm not sure who I want to go to next, because I really have a follow-up question for Spring and Trisetta on that one. Okay, so first I'm going to go to Spring. And Spring, when Nikki talked about mission drift, I just saw the money. I saw the money drifting right along with the mission, and realizing that the revenue and keeping track of the revenue and to your point, right? When you are a nonprofit and you were talking about the money and having to account for the money, if you said that your nonprofit focuses on X, Y, and Z, as passionate as you may be about 1, 2, and 3, spending the money on 1, 2, and 3 is not a good idea. Is that true? Is that not true? Talk to me about this revenue and the mission drift and the taxes and how they can stay out of trouble.
So that is a great question, Lynette. And yes, I see it often where you have a specific mission, right? And so for instance, I'm going to use one of the organizations that I'm a part of is called the Well Rockport. I'm the treasurer of the board for that organization. And so our mission is to help women in crisis who have experienced domestic violence or sexual assault or sexual abuse. So that's the mission, right? We are helping women who are in crisis. To help them, we are establishing a transitional housing space. So everything that we do right now is focused on this transitional housing space. So everything that you do needs to align with your mission. And as you said, your mission states ABC, but you want to help with 1, 2, 3. Well, if 1, 2, 3 don't align with ABC, then it is essentially illegal for you to spend the money on 1, 2, and 3. So, for instance, with with our transitional housing project that we're working on right now, within that are several programs, life skills programs, counseling services, legal advocacy. Those are things that are helping us to fulfill our mission. Therefore, if someone donates money to us and they say, okay, I want this money to specifically be used for your counseling services, then I need to earmark that money and say, okay, let me show you how we're spending these specific dollars on our counseling services. So it's all about your documentation, and it's all about what you can prove if you get audited. Because if you're just taking in money and you're just spending it haphazardly, you are going to have a nightmare on your hands when it comes to your taxes, when it comes to your donors and they ask for a budget or they want to see how you specifically are spending money on certain programming. And it's going to get you into a whole heap of trouble, and it's going to be an expensive mess to get cleaned up. And it can essentially be something that shuts your organization down because you just can't afford to keep up with it. And so my suggestion always is, in the beginning when you're first getting started, you need to have some seed money, or you need to have a good idea of how you're going to raise this money. And a good amount of seed money is anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 to get started, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. And you can have an army of volunteers to start. You just need to make sure that you document what it is that they're doing, what you need them to do, and that they are volunteers, and that the volunteers understand that whatever they do is essentially unpaid. And then at a time when you can start to hire people, then you can start to look at who has what experience and how they fit into your organization mission and the long-term vision that you have. But yeah, it gets convoluted when you are trying to do so many different things that don't necessarily align with your mission. And sometimes even there's things that may align with your mission that are just really outside of your wheelhouse and what you can provide. And that's when those community partnerships become really, really essential.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love it. And you segue perfectly to my question for Trisetta, because when I hear mission drift, I also heard this is one of the reasons that nonprofit leaders, in particular the executive director, winds up with a million things on their plate, and the plate turning into a platter, and them not necessarily being as productive and fruitful as they can be because it's turned into mission drift. What do you think about that, Trisetta?
Oh yeah, I use that term quite frequently, actually, because essentially what you need is prioritization, right? You've got to prioritize your mission. So what is it that you're wanting to accomplish? What are the results that you're after? and make decisions about what it is that you put on your to-do list, what it is that you're actually doing as a leader and as an organization, and to ensure that those things align with what the mission is and what your strategic initiatives are. Because otherwise you start doing good things, right? You have good intentions and they're good things, but they're out of alignment. And so you start to spread yourself too thin and you're ineffective, right? One of the examples that I like to use regularly with regard to prioritization is a concentrated cleaner. Right, we've all used a concentrated cleaner at one time or another, and it's strongest when it is pure, right, straight out the bottle. So think about, like, that is your mission, that's your focus, right? It's strongest when you're focused on that. But when you add on a side project, right, you have now diluted the power or the strength by half, by 50%. So you're only able to give so much of your attention, so much of your focus to one over the other. One is going to suffer. And then if you start adding in a 3, you talked about 1, 2, 3, you add in a third, now you've diluted it down to 33 and 3/3%. And just think about how more ineffective you're going to be in generating the results that you desire. So it's really important to establish your strategic goals, right? Those are your priorities, and revisit those on a consistent basis, at least on a quarterly basis, to make sure that you are staying in alignment with the things that you said that you want to do, so you avoid that mission drift. And not only that, make sure that you're running any type of opportunity, any type of new initiative, any new project, when you're going through the decision-making process, that you run that through. Does this align with the mission, the effort? Because listen, nonprofits have limited resources. You don't have a whole lot of resources. You're trying to do smaller ones anyway. You're trying to do a lot with a little. So you want to make sure that you use those to your strategic advantage.
All I can do is do a shout on that one. That is absolutely on point and brings me to a perfect question for Nikki, because we're talking about that mission and staying focused on the mission. And something that I saw in my time consulting nonprofit organizations is a couple of things. One, sometimes as you get into the work, the mission does change. It does shift a little because you know something different, or something in the economy has changed, or something in the world has changed, or whatever that may be. But when you start the mission drifting, you also create confusion with your team, and you also can potentially create confusion with the community, the people that you need support from. And so, Nikki, my question is, how can nonprofit leaders refine their mission to keep their team inspired and clear and to also attract more community support?
That is so true on so many levels. I will give a quick example, and I actually posted this on social media a few days ago, that I was working with an amazing organization, and I love the work. And my executive director was a big dreamer, not necessarily a big planner, but a big dreamer. And so she would come to me with all these amazing ideas, and I would say, you know what? I can't give you all of that, but I can give you 75%. I can give you 50% of what you just asked for, which meant then I needed to shift that down to my team. What happened was, most times I stretched myself a little bit and probably gave her 80 or 85% versus the 70 or 75%. But what also happened is I experienced burnout and compassion fatigue, as did my team. So it is extremely important that if you are going to make these changes, people grow, organizations grow, the world changes for sure, but you have to be strategic and intentional at how you grow, how you move, how you develop, and make sure that you are including your, I would say, stakeholders, your most important stakeholders. That can be your board, that can be your donors, that can be your staff, that can be the constituents that you are working with, but make sure that you are including them in the process so they know what changes are happening and why, what changes are coming. What I would say to that is we have to be strategic and intentional. And again, go back to that purpose. Like Trisetta said, you have to prioritize. So what can we do now? What can we do first? Can we do that thing 5 years from now? Where do we need to go today? If it is a crisis, and let me say this. If you are constantly operating in crises, that is an indication of a problem. So if you are in a crisis moment and you have to make a crisis decision, you know that something is off. And so I think that we often look at nonprofit employees as these heart-centered people who want to give, and we take and take and take so much from them without necessarily pouring back into them. And so my philosophy is that really true leadership is getting the right people together on the same page, working for the same mission. And so if everybody is clear where we're going and how we're getting there, you do two things. You make sure that you have the right people on the bus and that they're ready to go. And those people who decide to opt out, that's better for everybody as well. And you can make room for more of the right people to come. But I think when we look at nonprofits and we look at burnout, we look at compassion fatigue, we look at trying to make miracles out of this little bit of money and stretch these very limited resources to do well. We have to realize that our people, our staff, really are our most valuable resource, because we can't do the work that we do without them. So we love volunteers, we love our donors, but the people who are doing the frontline work, we have to take care of them as well. And if you take care of them, then they take care of your people. And those are the people you need the most, because they're going to tell your story. They're going to sing your praises. They're going to tell other people about this amazing organization that they work for and why you should support it. But that goes back to supporting your team, keeping them in the know, making sure that you are utilizing their expertise in the best way. And in addition to them doing the work, really offering them opportunities to stay aligned and stay connected to the mission, because we're all working towards the same goal. So yeah, I think that's kind of take care of your people. That is the message. Take care of your people.
That's a perfect way to conclude that message and that thought, and another great segue to a question that I have for Trisetta. But before we go there, I want to thank Viet and Trina and Brian for coming to spend some time with us, and to Alba and Jaquela for still being here. We absolutely appreciate you. If you have questions or comments, please put those on the event page in the comments, and we will all, as a speaker panel, be going to the comments at the end of this live, and we will engage with you there. We will answer your questions if you perhaps are not able to stay on the call. So, Trisetta, Nikki really hit it, right? We're talking about mission. We're talking about how is the mission going to get accomplished. And as much as we are passionate, we need help. We need people. We need other areas of expertise. And in my experience, a lot of nonprofits are often short-staffed and or they have unskilled staff, and that creates some challenges in and of itself. And I know that you talk about talent optimization. Can you share that with us here?
Absolutely. I think before I kind of talk about what talent optimization is, I think what ends up happening is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. What ends up happening with a lot of and not just nonprofits, this happens, across all industries and sectors, but we have a tendency to do desperate hiring, right? We have an opening, we have a need that needs to be filled, and because that work you're already kind of tight, we're like, let me just get a body, right? Like, I just need a body in here to help carry the load, rather than making sure that you're hiring the right person, that it's a good fit for not only the role, but the organization and the team. And that's really where talent optimization comes into play. There's four tenets that align with that are a part of the talent optimization framework. It's diagnose, design, hire, and inspire. And really what it's about is taking a look at pulling back and really looking at what are the needs of the organization as a whole. What are we doing? What roles do we need to fulfill the work that we're doing? And then building the role, not just with the specific type of tasks that the person is doing, but the type of skills that are needed to successfully carry out those tasks, as well as the personality that role needs to have. So, like, think about someone who is very introverted and autonomous, and they like to keep to themselves, and putting them, just because they have the skills, putting that person in a role where they have to be in the limelight, where they're having to constantly be giving presentations or be in front of other people. That's going to be a challenge for them. You're setting them up for failure, because that doesn't really align with their personality. So you want to make sure you have all three of those elements in your job description or position description, whatever you call it within your organization. And then you want to also make sure you're training your managers, training your leaders, whoever's making those hiring decisions, to ascertain that information as they're going through the interview process, so that they're looking for the things that will help them to determine, is it a role fit, is it a team fit, and is it an organization fit, before they make a hiring decision. And then on the flip side of that, we also need to make sure that we're fostering a culture within our organization that supports our greatest asset, our staff. We want to do things that help to build them up, like doing some career pathing, career tracking for them, having wellness programs, having benefits for them that allow them to take a step back so that they can take care of themselves. And also being sure that we model work-life balance, because just because you say that, we really want you to disconnect when you go home for the day, but then they see the leaders of the organization sending emails late at night or in the wee hours of the morning, or in the office super early and staying super late, what ends up happening is you have unintentionally said to them, in order for you to be in a leadership role in our company or in our organization, this is what you have to do. And so it's important that you have all of those elements working together so that you create a team that is high performing and is also burnout proof. So anyway, that's a very overly simplified overview of what talent optimization is, but I think it gives you a really clear picture of how all these elements work together so that you can create a team that is really high performing, and is able to create the impact, achieve the strategic initiatives of the organization, but doing it in a way that honors their own well-being.
Absolutely, 100%. Welcome, Paula and Chanel. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I don't know about anyone else, but I'm sitting here thinking to myself, yes, I love this mission. It's important to me. I know I need help. I would love to be able to do all of the things that Trisetta just said, because it is going to support my people. But that requires money. We don't have it. And so, Spring, this is your baby. What is the secret to nonprofit leaders securing more funding so that they can actually run a nonprofit, successfully? Like, there's so many things that I know nonprofit leaders would love to be able to do, but their response has always been to me, we just don't have it in the budget.
Yeah, and that's always the issue, They simply don't have it in the budget. A lot of times, when I was listening to Trisetta, I was like, oh my goodness, this is right on point, because, you want to make sure you set aside money to at least have a partially competitive salary for someone, so that you can get good talent, but also a set aside budget for training and development. But where is this money going to come from, right? So there's grants, there's private foundations, and all of these things are typically very competitive. But then there's also really innovative ways that you can make money yourself. And so, for instance, there's an organization around here that does purse bingo. Oh my goodness, when they set up for purse bingo, when they put the tickets out there, they sell out in like 3 minutes. There's another organization that does a loteria, which is like a Hispanic bingo, sells out in minutes. And so it's about getting creative, being innovative about how you get money. If your organization has some sort of special service that they offer, is there a way for you to coin that and monetize that? Are there some free advertising for you, some T-shirts that you could maybe create and sell at just at a minimal cost for people to advertise freely for you to learn more about your organization and then consider actually donating to the organization. So it's all about being innovative and really thinking about different ways to bring more money in. And that's where it comes in, where you may have to find someone who's like your development director, or maybe you want to hire someone on a contractual basis to come in and help you put something together, put a strategy in place to really start to bring in more money. But this is where donor stewardship comes in as well, where you really have to nurture those either corporations that you want to partner with, because there are a lot of corporations out there that want to get their name out there for being a social impact company, but they're just trying to figure out the right way to do it. So there's a bunch of different ways to bring in revenue, but you have to get creative. And if that's not really your wheelhouse, then again, you have to invest in that. Figure out a way to bring someone in to help you. And bringing someone in to help you isn't necessarily going to cost you an arm and a leg. And there are some people that are willing to come in and go help you find the money to even pay their fee, in addition to raising more funds for whatever project or program it is that you're trying to fund in the moment.
Okay, now before you go, you said purse, and my ears perked up. So I would love to hear more of a detailed example on purse bingo. How does that work? Am I going to win a purse? What kind of purse is it? Like, how did they sell that out in minutes or days? That would be a great case study for you to share.
So what they do is they have the organization, most of the ladies of the organization, their husbands will come in to help them with this. And so they'll walk around essentially with a purse, and they have items that they are either auctioning off or items for sale or what have you, or experiences or whatever the case may be. And you pick from the purse what it is that a number or whatever, and that is the price that you pay for that particular item or experience or what have you. And so if there's someone that wants to like throw in another bid or something like that, they'll go around to people that want to pick to see, okay, what are you going to pay for this? Or what are you going to, what did you pull? What can you do? And then if you want to add additional stuff onto that to make it more competitive, then you do. So that's how they do that. And they raise so much money doing that.
That was very interesting indeed. Okay, before I leave you though, Spring, it is absolutely true that there's a lot of competition right now for funding, and particularly for grant funding. And it seems like everyone is looking in the same places for grants that may be available. I would love to know if you have any suggestions on places that nonprofit leaders can look outside of the norm for grant funding.
Yeah, that is a great question. So most grants are going to be through government entities, but there's a lot of government entities that people are not necessarily familiar with. And so you have to register on sam.gov, and that process can be a little daunting, and it can take a little while to do because they have to verify you. They have to give you several different numbers. They no longer use the DUNS number, but now it is the unique entity identifier, and they can also give you a cage code, which they've been doing that as well, but they're no longer using the DUNS number. And so the best place for you to look for grants is on sam.gov. But then there's also a place called RFP Mart that you can look at, but that requires a subscription. It's minimal. There's a subscription that's as low as $6 for you to get to have access to a bunch of different grants that may be available to you, or requests for proposals from government entities, from private entities. RFP Mart has a large database. But that's pretty much where you're going to be finding your stuff. Other than that, it's private foundations, and you can just do a general Google search for private foundations that give grants, granting organizations and stuff like that. But there's really no trick to it. There's really no hack or anything like that. It's just it has gotten very competitive recently. And typically in an election year, funds get a little tighter because they're trying to see who's coming in, what is this person's agenda, and how is the economy going to change because of it. So I'm pretty sure once we get through this election, money will be a lot more free flowing because the new president-elect, whoever that is going to be, will have something to prove in their first 100 days. So they'll want to open up funding for some of the promises that they made in their campaigning. So yeah.
Absolutely. And so, Nikki, what I was thinking about is when it comes to funding, and you mentioned a little earlier about community relationships and networking. There are private donors out there, to Spring's point. They have money. There's lots of money out there. It's just not necessarily coming in the form of a government grant. But in order to know people who have that private money, you do have to be out in your community. You do have to network. You do have to, do things like attend fundraising events and things of that nature. What I would like to know from you, Nikki, is, in my experience, all nonprofit leaders are not extroverts. They're not, they don't have the skills to network effectively, to bring in more money, to bring in those private donors. What are some personal development skills? What would you recommend that is most needed, or that they can work on, that they can add to their arsenal, that would help them with bringing in more money?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I'm going to answer that question in two parts. The easiest part, I'll go first. And it's true that many executive directors and nonprofit leaders have a passion or a personal experience related to the organization that they're working with or working for. And that doesn't always lend itself to the business of nonprofits, because nonprofits are a business. And so I think that if it really is not your strong suit, like Trissette mentioned, sometimes we're not using people's skills in the best way. We're not using our own skills in the best way. So that's when you count on your board of directors, or maybe you have an assistant director or a staff personal development director who's great at all of those things. Or you create a space where it is comfortable for you. So one thing that my executive director was great at doing in one particular organization was creating personal events for government officials, foundation leaders to come to. So whether that was a fundraising dinner at someone's home or a high tea, these very intimate experiences where people could come and network and connect and get to know each other without the 5,000 people in the room, was a great way to get your name out there, connect with the right people, and also ensure that the mission and the vision of the organization was at the forefront. So that meant getting staff involved, maybe getting clients who were being served involved, and making it something that was our thing instead of going out and doing everybody else's thing. I think that for those nonprofit leaders who really don't want to do the traditional politicking and networking, have a backup plan. Although your job is to bring in money as the executive director, have a backup plan, or someone you can tag team with, or a group of people who can support and assist in different ways. If they have an expertise in a specific area, you can send someone else on your behalf. If you are a nonprofit leader and you really know that this is what you're called to do and you want to strengthen your skills and get better, I think practice makes perfect, and that's just the truth. You have to practice, be strategic and intentional in the kinds of events that you attend. Ensure that there are 2, 3, 4 people that you have to meet. You don't have to go and talk to everyone. Have your elevator speech, prepared. But I think working with a coach, working with a consultant, practicing with someone on your team. Sometimes, the executive director is not necessarily the person who is reading or writing the reports, but making sure that as the executive director that you know all of the quote unquote success stories. So my executive director was able to give specific examples, not just say, we graduated, 50 teenage girls from this program. She was able to give specifics on the young people, what they had overcome, what they had achieved, where they were going next. And so I think when we look at things like Toastmasters, when we look at there are organizations that work specifically with nonprofit leaders, when we talk about building a professional brand, if the way that is easiest for you is, networking on LinkedIn, then do that. If it is a specific skill, you're really not an extrovert, then it's something that you really have to work at. Personally, I would say I loved the connections with the young people. So I would go to those events and do all the things that I needed to do. And I would say, if you bring them to me, I can sell a program. I don't want to have to go out and find them. And then I would go home and be exhausted. But it was for a purpose. So I'll say my heart is full, but my body is exhausted because as an introvert, it took so much out of me. So knowing your skills, knowing your strengths, knowing who can be your backup, all of those things are important. But I say you have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to share stories, be engaging. You have to be able to make the numbers not just look like numbers, but tell a true story and show the impact, the true impact that you're making. And sometimes we do have to get that help, that coach, that training program, that practice. So, yeah, I think there are two routes we can go.
Perfect, because what you stated really goes to something I say often, is you don't always have to be the source, you can be the resource. And in sharing that information, that means that yes, as a leader, in my opinion, it is important for us to continue to develop our skills. And it's important to realize when you can pass the baton to someone else who has a skill that you don't have. We don't have to be super people all the time in all the things. And so that brings me to Tracetta. And Tracetta, I'm thinking about, we've talked so much about the leaders themselves. When the leaders now have this team in place, how can they really, in the talent optimization, you talked about them identifying the talent. How can they help to increase the efficiency of the people on their team in their specific talent areas, and particularly if they identify that a team member has a gift such as this? How can they bring them into that space to develop them further and perhaps in an area that they didn't initially hire them for?
That's a really good question. I would say kind of a two-pronged approach here. One thing, the pinnacle or the most important, is that you have processes for all of the things that get done. So maybe, it's not your wheelhouse, but you had to do it because you didn't have anybody else. You had to do it. But now you have someone on your team who has the skill. If you have already written out the process to do the thing, that's going to help. Number two, this is going to help you to be able to delegate, because you have a step-by-step process that the delegate can be able to follow, and it should have within it a clear definition of done. Now, we want to be conscientious here about pulling someone in to do a task or a role within the organization that they were not hired to do without restructuring their position. you want to make sure that if you're pulling someone outside of what they were hired to do, that you have that you actually go through and restructure their position, or reevaluate the needs, or maybe even maybe it's a lateral move for them to move into a different role. But you want to be fair to the person, because oftentimes what happens is our high performers get the short end of the stick, right? We lean on them so much because they are good workers, because they are highly skilled, and very and kind of Jacks and Jills of all trades. But what that does is put them in a position to, if they don't already have strong boundaries, it puts them in a position where they can burn out quickly, and you're going to end up running off the very person that you really value the most. So you want to be fair with them, and sitting down, having conversation with them about, hey, I see that you have the skill. I see that you have this talent here. It really aligns with this thing. How can we work together to create a role that really aligns with what your goals are, your professional goals are, what your skill sets are? Because just because they're good at it doesn't mean that they necessarily desire to do that. They may actually be good at it, but hate it. And so you want to, you just don't want to take advantage and run good people off because you're not going through the process of really evaluating, diagnosing what's going through that talent optimization process, and diagnosing what's going on, designing an appropriate role, and then realigning your talent to fit into a role that aligns well with the organization and with their own personal gifts, skills, talents, and abilities, and their professional ambitions.
Thank you. I am so grateful that you touched on role creep, because you're right. We burn out good people because we see all of their talents and we keep piling on more things for them to do. And just because people are good at something doesn't mean that they love doing it. One of the things I do with my team is every time that I know we need a new role or we need new tasks done, I let my team know that we are getting ready to hire this particular person or for this particular role, or we need these tasks done. Is there anyone on the team who would like to do those tasks? So my question to them is, what tasks would you love to take off of your plate in exchange for putting these new tasks on? And those who are interested will message, and they'll say, okay, I love this. The tasks that are on my plate, which I'd love to swap off, are these. And when that whole conversation is done, then I now have a list of tasks that I actually need to hire for. Because what I've also seen happen is we hire new people, and there are people on the team who are thinking to themselves, well, I really would have loved to do that, or that's something I would like to learn how to do, and we didn't necessarily consider the growth of someone on our team before we brought in someone new. And so that's just the way that I approach it, and it has worked for me for years. Any thoughts on that from anyone?
I actually love that question that you posed them. It's like, what tasks do you currently have that you would like to let go of in favor of taking on these new tasks? I think that's a really great positioning question for your current team.
I love that question as well. One of the things that I would do at hiring was really ask my team about their kind of future career goals, the direction that they wanted to go in. So in addition to asking that question, along the way, I could ask, this particular thing is coming up. Do you want to go to this event? This particular thing is coming up. Do you want to be a part of this initiative? And so it was a regular part of their work experience to have that professional development I think centering professional development is extremely important, especially for nonprofits who may not have huge training and development goals. We can do that with stretch projects without burning people out. We can utilize people's strengths in ways that work for them so they feel like they're contributing, they're learning, they're growing. Another thing was also allowing them to do trainings. So they are gaining new skills, and they're also influencing and sharing and educating their colleagues and coworkers. And so everyone had a different way to showcase their talents and strengths. And another thing that I would do is I would do an initial interview. And when I had a person that I really thought was the right candidate, I would bring someone from the team in, 1 or 2 people, for a second interview. So they would get to be a part of that process and actually take their opinions into account as well, because that person will also be their colleague and coworker. And that has worked really well in terms of creating a culture where everybody feels like they are valued, that they have very unique talents and skills, and that they are growing while they're also working. Now, we want to pay them, and as we're working on getting the funding for those salaries, there are also other things that we can do to keep them engaged and feeling like they are valued and contributing.
Thank you for sharing those extra ideas. There's so many. That's a conversation. Team engagement, employee engagement, team morale. I think that will be an amazing conversation just all by itself. There's so many ways that we can engage our team that don't necessarily cost money. Yes, some things do, but everything doesn't cost money. So I would love to do an entire audio event on that topic. But I'm going to segue to Spring for the last question. And then what we're going to do is we're going to close out with a final question that I have for everyone. And then we are going to go to the comments. So if you've had questions, if you've had thoughts, if you've left a comment there, we will go to the comments. We will answer those. We will engage with you there. And then the entire event will end at 12:30. And so, Spring, the final question I have for you is, we've talked so much about the needs of nonprofits and the importance of how they handle the money. I would love to know if you have any tips to help them further with managing their finances wisely so that they can ensure long-term sustainability for the organization.
So that is a great question. And I think one of the most basic things that they can do, if you don't have a finance person on staff, if you can't afford one, for one, the organization has to have a board. So if you have someone on the board that is just good with numbers or good with, it's a good idea to get with them and set up just a basic Excel spreadsheet. And this is something that's just the bare minimum at the very least. Set up a basic Excel spreadsheet that documents your income versus your expenses. So you're documenting donations that come in, any fees that you're collecting, like if it's a membership fee or what have you. You want to document that. You can do it, just say on a monthly basis. It doesn't even have to be itemized to say, Dr. Lynette's fee was this much, Tricetta's fee was this much, Nikki's fee was this much. It can just say, in the month of June, we collected, say, $500 in membership fees. Or in the month of June, we spent, say, $200 on our counseling program, or whatever the program is. You just want to document what you're spending and what you're getting in. If you're buying office supplies or anything that you have to go to the store for, keep those receipts. And at the end of the year, when it's time for you to give your information to your tax professional, you want to give them the spreadsheet. They're not interested in your receipts. Trust me when I tell you that you have to have there's a huge difference between a tax person and an actual accountant. And so at the bare minimum, I would say that's where you can at least get started, is to just set up a basic Excel spreadsheet. If you can't afford the software like a QuickBooks or something like that, just set up a basic Excel spreadsheet that documents your income and your expenses. And that will be very helpful to you when it comes time to file your taxes. And one thing I can say is that you may want to look into TechSoup for nonprofit organizations. It's a membership that gives you access to deeply discounted services and products. So it's definitely worth looking into. And also Google for nonprofits. Once they approve you, you can get access to a full suite of Google services at no cost to your organization. So those are some quick little money tips for you.
Wonderful. I love that. I would appreciate it if you would put a link to those resources in the comments when we are done, if that's okay. Let's see.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, Tracetta, 1 to 2 minutes. This is your question. Why is productivity important to nonprofit leaders' ability to thrive?
1 to 2 minutes. Okay, so there's a difference between being busy and being productive. And a lot of times we are busy doing a lot of things, but we're not actually being productive. And so productivity to me is really about producing a product, right? The root of the word is product. You are at the end of you exerting time, energy, and money, you are producing some sort of product, some sort of result. And that result should be tied back to whatever your strategic initiatives are, back to that mission of the organization. And, because our not only our financial resources, but our time and people resources are finite, you want to make sure that you're using those to their highest level of efficiency as possible, right? You want to squeeze all the juice out in the best way possible without wasting anything. And I think that's really what productivity is all about, making sure that you're spending time on the things that matter most. And then you can that you have that time for the things that matter most. And then you can fill in the gaps with other things, but you really want to make sure that those big rocks, those strategic initiatives are the things that you're focused on the most.
I love that. Okay, Nikki, last question, 1 to 2 minutes. If you could go back 20 years ago when you started in the nonprofit space, since you've held so many different roles in nonprofit, what would you tell yourself?
That is an amazing question. I think I would tell myself exactly what I started off with, that you deserve to do work that feeds your heart, your mind, and your wallet, because for so long, I let the purpose, passion, mission keep me in a place where I was struggling financially. And that financial struggle prevented me from, although I did my job well, I know that I could have done things differently if I didn't have that extra weight and that extra worry. And it is okay to be paid to do something that you're good at. And so one of my mantras is that I am paid well to do work that I love and that comes naturally to me. And that was something that I would not have thought about 20 years ago because we had been taught that you essentially you needed to be a martyr. And so I am very intentional about breaking down that stereotype and that myth. It is harmful. It keeps organizations struggling. It keeps people struggling. It's one of the reasons that we are experiencing a lot of burnout, because we're overworking people, or people are working 2 or 3 jobs. So I would say that we can do well and also live well.
Perfect.